Hello, welcome to my video on the major transits of Capricorn season, which straddles the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, going from December 21st, the winter solstice, until January 19th when the sun enters Aquarius. So where are we? We're at the end of the unprecedented year where the use of the word unprecedented was unprecedented, and where many of us have lost a lot, whether it's family members, whether it's our jobs, whether it's our trust in each other, or our faith that things will turn out okay. It has been a difficult year in all of those respects. And so Capricorn season really embodies this kind of straddling of the old and the new, and this spirit of kind of having to reconcile with what has occurred over the previous 12 months and how to look towards the future. It is that bridge. And Capricorn season begins on the winter solstice. And the winter solstice is really, right, it is the period of the longest night in the northern hemisphere, where the sun is at its most absent. And it can be likened to a new moon of sorts. It is this kind of reset and the greatest time of darkness. And symbolically and metaphorically, that offers an invitation into ourselves to connect with some of the voices that are quieter when our life is in full bloom and there's lots of light and all of the plants are alive, and we're kind of in the peak of the swelling of corporeal reality, right? So when the biomass is at its peak in the summer solstice, has a little bit more of the full moon energy, whereas the winter solstice has the stillness, the inwardness, sometimes the stirrings of the unconscious and dream life that start to hint at directions that we might move forward towards. I chose this picture that I took a few weeks ago of hoarfrost on some branches for Capricorn season because there's a way in which, right, Capricorn is the opposite of Cancer. I really loved this image because it related it to water as well, right? So Cancer, we think of this primordial, very fertile ocean from which life springs. And Capricorn, as ruled by Saturn and in the winter, is kind of given to death. And the end of those primordial waters, or the stillness, right, that just comes from cyclic time. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon goes through phases and can't, part of being fertile is not always being producing. And we learn that with land, and we learn that with bodies. I feel like I'm having a different experience of that now, having given birth to my son almost 5 months ago. And my body has just going through this huge project, not only to create him and to give birth to him, but now through the first 5 months of his life, looking at him and realizing that his entire body is made from my body. Because I'm lucky enough that I've been able to just breastfeed him entirely. So, but what kind of, where that puts me in a season of dormancy. having just done that. And so we found this hoarfrost looking for our Christmas tree deep in a canyon that does not get very much sunlight at all in the winter, right? So it's the humidity in the air slowly making these gorgeous snowflakes condensing around branches. And I was thinking of the growth of the ice being like the growth of Capricorn. You know, it's slow, it's cold, it's happening in the dark, but it's steady and it's structured. And right, it may not be the gorgeous blooming of a flower, but there's still this beauty and steadiness and sense of kind of a deep design in its being. And how even in seasons of barrenness is relative, and gorgeous structures are being produced. They're just growing more slowly. Another image could be the growth of crystals underground. And that makes me really think of the Advent and the season of the Advent, and in Waldorf education, which I spent some time in, the first light of Advent being the light of the stones, the light of shells and crystals that dwell in Earth's dark home. And so we're kind of invited to dwell inside of ourselves. And we're not dormant because, right, in dormancy, right, which is related to the word for sleeping, we're dreaming. And dreaming is such an important process for life coming into being, right? The season of dreaming, the season of, right, on farms right now, what they're doing is they're ordering seeds. They're dreaming the year ahead and they're ordering the seeds and they're planning these seeding dates for when these things will be started to slowly build up all of this coming into being. And that is, you know, while it's not the hard work of being out in the fields and weeding and harvesting and washing, and it doesn't have that kind of frenzied quality, it is the beginning. So the same with the new moon and the same with the winter solstice. What we are doing now is dreaming in our bodies the year that we will live ahead. And not that we have perfect control over that, not that we're, you know, not that we can write a letter to Santa about exactly what we want, but the images that come to us have messages for the journey that we'll go on, whether it's in our control or out of our control, whether it's about the triumph of the will or whether it is about learning surrender to things outside of us and learning the deep faith that comes when we surrender those things. So I wanted to start a discussion of Capricorn season kind of within that mood. I also wanted to talk about a course that I have coming up. I have designed a course that really honors the complexity and the richness of the moon, both from an intellectual, theoretical, astrological point of view, but also this course is half seminar and half experiential piece, because it wouldn't feel right to me to teach about the moon or talk about the moon in a purely kind of mercurial way. Because the moon is what binds us to our bodies, to each other, to our stories, to the earth. And so I don't want to talk about the moon without having a context for really inviting participants into feeling their moon and gaining a rich experience of her and building a relationship with her. So it happens on the first 13 Mondays of the year. So that's every Monday in January, February, and March. It'll be 90 minutes in the evening. The first part will be lecture on different pieces of the moon. So we will go over the moon through her phases, through her signs, through the houses. We'll go over the progressed lunar cycle, lunar returns, eclipses, lunar nodes, and then also using the moon to connect with matrilineal heritage, ancestral stuff, and synastry and how we use that in our families and in the creation of our personal stories. And so we'll have a lecture portion where you get all the information, but then a discussion and experiential pieces. The class is quite small because I want it to build community and feel safe for participants to share and get to know each other. And it's over half full. So if you feel called to it, I'll put a link in the description of this video. And I really, really hope you'll join us because I think it is going to be hopefully a beautiful lunar experience. Okay, and without further ado, let's hop into the major storylines of Capricorn season. Okay, right, so Capricorn season doesn't just begin at the beginning, though a solstice is a kind of beginning, right? The sun starts coming back to us, so we're gaining light. Hopefully we have had a rich experience since the equinox of composting stories from the year, composting old pieces of ourselves that need to go. And now we can start with a breath, with a prayer, with an image of what has started to stir under the soil of our lives that will germinate in the coming year. So where are we? We have Saturn freshly in Aquarius. For just a few days, it went in, depending on your time zone, on the 16th or the 17th. We have Jupiter freshly in Aquarius. It went in on the 19th. We have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius that happens on the solstice, and which is getting a lot of press, both from the astrological community, the astronomical community, and mainstream media is picking up on it. So I am sure that you have heard of it, but we will talk about it a little bit more so as not to be remiss. We begin in the first quarter of the lunar month, which has just kind of been the style. The first quarter has started as the sun enters each new sign. So that is picking up in the busier parts of the month. So we kind of have a month divided in half, where the first part of Capricorn season, the first 2 weeks will be the busier two, and the second two will be a little bit more inward and be in the dark hemicycle of the moon. Okay, we are also still in eclipse season for a bit. So we've had both of our eclipses. So we're out of kind of the most intense part of eclipse season, which occurs in between eclipses. So in between the November 30th eclipse and the December 14th eclipse was kind of the most potent time. But the way I read it, we're still in eclipse season until we have a lunation that is uneclipsed. And so that will happen on December 29th. It's the Cancer full moon, and it is the first uneclipsed Cancer lunation, I think, since, it was a while ago, since July of 2018. So that is a long time. So we can enjoy a big Cancer full moon without kind of the meat grinder of Capricorn, now that Capricorn has been significantly de-emphasized with the exodus that we had earlier in the year of the South Node leaving Capricorn. Saturn is no longer in Capricorn, Jupiter is no longer in Capricorn. So right now we just have Pluto, and then obviously the sun starting on the solstice. And we have Mercury there as well right now for a short while. Okay, so that's kind of where we are. The main stories of Capricorn season We will have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Jupiter and Saturn both moved into Aquarius, but we've only had a couple days of each. These are long transits. These are outer planets. They have significance that goes, it certainly reaches beyond your personal life. And so we'll kind of get an introduction to what their time in Aquarius may look like over the next few weeks. It's not until Aquarius season, when the sun will conjoin them, that it might get a little bit more clear. So we're still kind of in the prelude of them. And part of the impact of that is going to be seen, what comes out of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which again is not just one day. I mean, the exact conjunction happens on one day, but it has an impact that will last probably for the whole next year, and then also for the next 20 years until the next Jupiter-Saturn conjunction occurs in Gemini. We have the end of Mars and Aries finally. And so part of what that means, we've had Mars and Aries for almost 7 months. It went in June and it will leave in early January. It's stationed retrograde in September at 28 degrees of Aries. So basically the very end of Aries. So as Mars leaves Aries, it will also leave the shadow of its retrograde. So kind of the frustration and the hard work of this fall will find some resolution, hopefully, as Mars leaves Aries. We also have Jupiter's square to Uranus. And so this is a significant outer planet square, but unlike Saturn, Jupiter will only square Uranus once. So kind of the big storyline of 2021 in terms of outer planet transits is going to be 3 Saturn-Uranus squares, and I will get into that not hugely right now because the first one doesn't occur until Aquarius season. And they probably deserve a video all on their own. But the only one that we have where Jupiter squares Uranus occurs during Capricorn season. And then we have the end of eclipse season, and also we have our first uneclipsed Cancer Capricorn new moon and full moon since July of 2018. So that's kind of the overarching storylines of Capricorn season. As I said, we enter Capricorn season at the first quarter. We've got this, the half that builds up to the full moon in Cancer, and then starts, the falling action occurs towards that third quarter. Then we dip into the dark hemicycle of the moon, dropping towards a Capricorn new moon, which happens on the 12th. And then the sun will leave Capricorn actually just before the first quarter, but pretty well contained. And so we can expect kind of the busyness to occur in the first half of the month, as I said, and then things to get a little bit quieter and a little more internal in the second half of the lunar month. Okay, so here's what we're looking at for the first half. We have the moon square the sun on the solstice, and that brings us into the second quarter of the lunar month. It's so confusing that it's a first quarter moon, but it brings us into the second quarter of the lunar month. Language. So we have the sun moves into Capricorn. We've got that waxing square, and then we have the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction. And so this is also known as the Great Conjunction. It happens every 20 years. Astrologers are very excited right now because it is breaking a 200-year cycle, or not breaking a cycle, but it is our shift into these conjunctions occurring in air signs. They occur in signs of one element for 200 years at a time. So we have not had the last air sign series finished with an eclipse in 1405. So it's been about 800 years since then. And it began with an eclipse in 1226 and went to 1405. Those kind of the air centuries, and during that time we saw the expansion. That time period contained a lot of the Crusades, also Genghis Khan, Marco Polo. So what we got was a breakdown of boundaries, a huge expanse of travel, and then influx of goods and materials and technology as the world became more connected. And so, right, when we're looking ahead, we will probably see a questioning of borders over the next 200 years. What really makes sense in the context of the global economy? We'll see a huge expanse of technology. We'll see the good of that, right? Possibly, in the forms of scientists being able to share data, etc., but also the shadows of that, being spied on by big tech, how to protect personal privacy and civil liberties in the context of this huge expansion of technology. I think also we'll have a question of technology, of equality in technology, of whether it can equal the playing field economically, lols, or whether it will further divide us. And right, obviously, probably a little bit of both, and we'll see examples of both. And yeah, so that's just a little bit of what people are getting excited about with that that great conjunction. We have a Mars square to Pluto coming up on Wednesday the 23rd. That can be violent, it can be explosive. So really, it's going to come right before Christmas. We can see how that could happen politically. We can also watch for it personally. And when we watch for these things, we both need to witness them occurring inside of us, and then also be wary of them coming at us from the outside. So this is a pretty trigger happy transit. And so we just need to watch for ourselves getting triggered and other people getting triggered towards us. And so, right, leaning into how do we make people feel safe, and how do we keep ourselves safe interpersonally. Then on Christmas, we have Mercury trine Uranus. And honestly, just thinking about this transit, I think, well, Mercury trine Uranus. So we've got these two planets that have to do with communication, that have to do with technology. And I'm just thinking of how many people are going to be Zooming their families on Christmas this year. And there's just going to be an explosion of that. Maybe it will crash and we'll have to even get craftier. So that could happen as well. Kind of interruptions in communication. I think also that trine can invite us to say things that we wouldn't normally say. And that's another Mercury trine Uranus. So if you find yourself, it's an earth sign, so it's not necessarily pouring out your heart, but saying things you've been meaning to say for a while. Reaching out to someone that you haven't talked to for a long time. Thinking in new ways about what matters. Those would all be appropriate manifestations of that transit. Then on the 27th, we have the Sun trine to Uranus, right? And that's kind of like, I don't know, I just feel like that transit, it happens a couple times a year. So Uranus is in Taurus. The Sun trine to Uranus is going to happen in Virgo season and in Capricorn season of this year and the past few and the next few. And that is really, having sudden change of plans possibly, but because it is a trine, not not necessarily profound interruptions. So, you know, the new year may start looking quite differently. And maybe, you know, that sun trine to Uranus, with the sun possibly representing our rulers. Maybe the current president will get it together and we will get all of those vaccines sitting in warehouses delivered, or something like that, right? There'll be a new way in which we see, we see goods distributed or released or given to the people. The third quarter looks quiet, right? It's still in the busier half of the month, but we've got a Cancer full moon on December 29th. And then, so then we're out of eclipse season. We've got that full moon. And then we just have a couple of these transits for the following week. As you know, if you've watched these videos before, I make specific full moon and new moon videos. So you can look for them to come out a couple days before that full moon. Yeah, and I hope that full moon really kind of gives us a robust experience of connectivity, even from within our isolation. So that can, or pulls us towards that, right? You know, when we've got the sun in Capricorn opposite the moon in Cancer, and the moon in Cancer in her rulership, right? We've got the sun in Capricorn in this kind of frozen place growing its hoarfrost. And then feeling that balance of reaching out with love to our inner circle, or feeling the need for our inner circle, and that kind of reminding us where we are in the cycle of time, that we're not just working with slow progress, but that we need to remember to lean back in to keep the whole thing moving and in balance. But I will talk more about that as we get closer to the Cancer full moon. Following day, we have Venus square to Neptune. So Venus square to Neptune she can get starry-eyed about what she wants. She can get a little bit deluded. She can also think that she has discovered the ideal in what she wants. So this is going to be, it'll be interesting to see what people's New Year's resolutions are in the context of this transit occurring right before then. It may be overly ambitious. We may just be wrong about what the year ahead looks like as we're trying to visualize it or think about what would be our ideal experience. Then we have, towards the end of that week, we have Mercury conjoining Pluto on Monday the 4th. And that can really open us up to seeing, to taking stock of where we are in a very large context. So kind of, what this year is going to look like in this coming year in the context of last year. Mercury conjoining Pluto can also help us speak from kind of the archetypal layer of our psyches, which can be quite dangerous or quite profound, kind of depending on how we wield that power. So if you find that you have messages and thoughts that come from a larger context or a deeper voice than feels like just your own, that would make a lot of sense. Got this Cancer full moon. This is my artwork for that video. And then we will enter the waning cycle, or the waning half of the lunar cycle. So we Yeah, okay. Got lost for a moment. We have the waning square to the sun occurs on January 6th. And we also have Mars move into Taurus. So this is really profound, as I kind of talked about at the beginning of the video, because Mars has been in Aries since late June. And normally Mars would spend about 8 weeks in a sign, but we've had Mars in Aries for 7 months because of his retrograde. So we are into fresh territory for the first time, really. And I think what's another piece of this story is that part of Mars's retrograde and part of what made it so difficult and progress so slow within the context of that retrograde was its squares to Saturn. So it had one moving forward that happened in August, and then it had one as it retrograded, which happened at the very end of September, I think September 29th. And what's interesting about that story is that the third square that they'll come to didn't happen in Aries or Capricorn, but happens in between Taurus and Aquarius. So Mars moving into Taurus is Mars leaning into that first square with Saturn. That final square with Saturn, right? The problems that they encountered and the gridlock that they were in between Aries and Capricorn did not find resolution there, but between Taurus and Aquarius, which is a very different land. So we'll see that happen. A couple days later, we get Mercury into Aquarius. So Mercury moving very quickly, zooming through, already moved through Capricorn quite quickly, is now into Aquarius, where it will go retrograde by the end of January. Venus moves into Capricorn, so we've got Venus moving out of adventurous Sagittarius and into Capricorn, where what she loves and what she values is hard work, intentional planning, getting down to business. So, right, I mean, we can kind of see that. It'll be a week since the new year. The holidays are kind of winding down. Things are kind of getting back to back on track for hard work. And we have Mercury square to Mars. So Mercury, full of innovative ideas, comes into a conflictual square with Mars, who is in Taurus now, exhausted, I think, from Aries. Aries is a very high energy place for Mars. It gets a lot of work done there, but can burn out. Mars moves into Taurus, into a sign of its detriment. And part of why I think Mars is in its detriment in Taurus is because Taurus has a lot of inertia. And so it's hard to get Mars going. And I feel like after spending 7 months in this really high energy place, there is kind of a burnout. And so kind of all of this sparkly new ideas that Mercury can see from the space of Aquarius, Mars is not so easily motivated to make them happen from Taurus. So you could feel a little bit of that square, but hopefully, right, because it's the weekend, you can rest. And we're in the fourth quarter of the moon, so that's kind of the most kind of tired energy of the moon. So I would say certainly January 8th is a Friday, so just take the 9th and 10th and let Mercury do its sparkly thing, but don't make Mars do too much. Then on the 9th, Venus trines Mars, so she is going to be trying to inspire her lover to get a move on. Venus shows us what we want. Mars helps us go out and get it. In their trine, Venus can speak very clearly to Mars about what she wants. She's also in Capricorn, which is the sign of Mars's exaltation. So it could be very persuasive, but again, I think we're tired. And Mercury will also conjoin Saturn. So that can actually help with, okay, how are we going to plan this out? Saturn, that constriction can help Mercury in the Aquarian visions of the future. They're kind of having this powwow. this will be, I think, their only conjunction this year, where they kind of have a conference about the way things look and how things are going and how to move forward sustainably, but not necessarily take action because of where we are in the lunar cycle and all the things I've just talked about. Then on the 11th, Mercury conjoins Jupiter. So Saturn and Jupiter are just separating from their great conjunction. Mercury will join Jupiter, and this is probably, if it weren't the balsamic phase of the moon, I would say this is a very, very chatty day. I actually have this conjunction in my chart, if you can imagine. And it's super chatty, people with Mercury conjunct Jupiter. We've got Mercury, the thinker, speaker, conjunct Jupiter, expansive, and right, it's talks a lot. So it may lend a lot of kind of scintillating fantasy, and I would lean into that in a lunar way. So in dreams and creation and images, but don't push yourself too hard, even though you probably will. Okay, then we have a Capricorn new moon that occurs at 10 p.m. on the 12th. So that will say midnight for people on the East Coast. All of these times are in Mountain Standard Time, so you can just adjust them for where you are. This is the first uneclipsed Capricorn new moon in a long time. So we can take stock of all of the work that we've done on the Capricorn Cancer polarity for the last 2 years with eclipses occurring in those signs, and begin work in this house. So I think spending some time in gratitude, we've really worked Capricorn, no matter where Capricorn is in your chart, and what you have there, that house has gotten worked by Jupiter, by Saturn, by the South Node, by the eclipses. And I think before we start big plans and stuff, just spending some space and gratitude for your body's ability to process all of that material. In my own chart, that has occurred in my 12th house of isolation and deep psychological work, and it's been some big years of clearing out negative patterns of self-sabotage and limiting beliefs and old traumas, and a lot of stuff. And so kind of renewing that space as a space of spiritual wellness, as this space in which to hold myself safely as I explore experiences and versions of myself that are separate from my ego. And that's because it's in the 12th house. It would be a good time actually to start a new moon ritual in that space, because when we have eclipses in houses, we don't really want to do rituals around eclipses, because eclipses are very volatile. They can portend difficult things very easily. So we exercise caution around that. But now that the eclipses are not here, and this is our first uneclipsed Capricorn new moon in 3 years, we could start a new practice, and that would be a beautiful way to honor that new moon. We have a Mercury square to Uranus. So even if you can't think of a new practice to open that up with, you may be able to on the day. And so you can try that. And that should be fun. Then we have the next day, that square that I was talking about, Mars square to Saturn. So finally, Mars, the warrior, pushing forward ideals against this old worn out general. Only now they're not the warrior and the general from Aries to Capricorn. We've got Mars, who I always picture as Mars and Taurus as a farmer plowing fields, square to Saturn, right? Now we have Mars returned from the war in the fields, right? What are we going to grow to sustain the future? And instead of Saturn in Capricorn trying to maintain the status quo of tradition and history, we have Saturn in Aquarius, hopefully looking forward to a more egalitarian future for all of us. And, right, asking Mars to grow the crops to feed the people. And, right, having that as the end of this war. Mars may feel tired in Taurus and not feel like he has the strength to do it. And Saturn can be just as demanding in Aquarius as he is in Capricorn for different reasons. And so there's still that conflict with that square, but it's conflict around a very different story than it was in the late summer and the fall of 2020. We have Venus trine to Uranus, Venus trying something new, getting lit up. So we have this contact between the lovers in the sky, Mars and Venus, and also these outer planets, Saturn and Uranus. So I think this will be a really important time to kind of check in on that storyline, both collectively and personally, and what it's going to look like for you. And the next day we have Uranus station direct. So Uranus has been retrograde since August. It's stationed retrograde at almost 11 degrees of Taurus, and it is stationing direct at 6 degrees and 43 arc minutes of Taurus. So it retrograded over those 5 degrees. It's going to move forward again. And it will be direct until August 19th, where it will station retrograde at almost 15 degrees of Taurus. So we've got Uranus moving forward again, and planets can express their archetypes really clearly around stationing direct. So we might see some Uranian things having to do with new emerging technologies, changes in money, in the stock market, where because of its placement in Taurus, technologies around food, sudden epiphanies that change things on personal and collective levels. And the sun conjoins Pluto. So who even are you? The sun conjoining Pluto can be, the experience of a little bit of an ego death, especially if you're a Leo or have strong Leo placements. You can kind of get called on your bullshit this day and experience a kind of existential, threatening fear, right? There can kind of be the question of, we've started the new year and now we're 2 weeks in, what even are you doing? Uranus, which, because it's occurring on the same day as Uranus's direct station, might have to do with learning some new information that really throws us off course. The following day, we have no specific transits, but important to note that Mercury enters the shadow of its retrograde. So it goes past the degree to which it will retrograde back to in the retrograde that it has over the next month. Mercury won't station retrograde till January 30th, which is an Aquarius season, but we are now into kind of the prelude where if we notice, we can start noticing themes of what we will reassess and review during the coming retrograde. And so that will happen. The retrograde happens entirely within the sign of Aquarius. So this will be wherever you have Aquarius in your chart, whichever house it occupies, that will be the context of this retrograde. Then on the 17th, we have Jupiter square to Uranus. And I think we will have Jupiter square to Uranus will kind of create this eruption of whatever Uranus and Taurus portends. And it will be this huge expanse to which the Saturn-Uranus squares will try to ground in ways that could look like limitations, frustrations, stalemates that end in kind of explosive, one or the other of them storming off. Jupiter, I think, will open Pandora's box on this day. And then the Saturn-Uranus squares of the rest of the year will learn to deal with whatever has gotten out, or consider reopening it, or, you know, whatever will be kind of the story of that. So yeah, I think it will be an exciting days leading up to it and afterwards to kind of see what this one time square of these planets have to say to each other. And then on the 19th, we have Sun into Aquarius. So that wraps up Capricorn season of 2020 and 2021. Yeah, we'll have that new moon on the 12th. I'll probably talk about hoarfrost some more. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much. As we enter Aquarius season, we'll look at the Mars conjunction with Uranus, the Sun's conjunction with Saturn, a Leo full moon, Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius, an Aquarius new moon, and the first Saturn-Uranus square. If you find these videos helpful and interesting, please like them and subscribe to my channel if you want to keep seeing them. Again, I have a new course starting in the beginning of January to do a deep dive into the moon, both personally and within community. So you can find the link to sign up for that or just get more information in the description of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you for my lunation videos and for Aquarius season in the end of January. Okay, I wish you a productive Capricorn season of dreaming your way into a new year.